Hi, happy Earth Day, everyone. I'm Dan Stormont. I'm the president of Sustainable Tucson. Sustainable Tucson is a nonprofit here in Tucson that focuses on education and action towards sustainability, especially related to the Sustainable Development Goals. We like to use those as a framework for some of the projects and actions that we take. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about those today as they apply to Tucson. Now, hopefully you already saw the presentation about the Sustainable Development Goals, so you're familiar with them, but I'm going to cover them just a little bit and then talk about some of the ones that apply here. So first of all, these are the Sustainable Development Goals. They were developed by almost all of the United Nations member nations a number of years ago. And so they're oriented towards trying to achieve these goals by the year 2030, which means we don't have a lot of time left. That's only 10 years from now. You can see they cover a lot of different things. So they cover no poverty and zero hunger. Those are pretty important things. But they also have some things like, sustainable cities and communities and clean water, which is important. Gender equality, you may wonder why that matters, but actually, gender equality is really important to creating a sustainable and just society. And there are some things that talk specifically about justice, like number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. So the Sustainable Development Goals cover a lot of ground, but they all relate to having a more just and equitable world for all of us to live in. And we can't really reach a sustainable globe unless we address all of these things. We can't just address one of them by themselves. Now, every couple of years, there's an organization that does national reports. Actually, there are a number of different organizations that do reports for the different nations in the world, usually the larger nations, of course. Um, and there's one report that's done for the United States that was done in 2018. That was the most recent one. You can see down in the bottom corner of the slide, there's the URL if you want to go look up this report for yourself. But you can see that this was done in 2018, and I pulled out the results for Arizona just as a state, so it's not specifically just a Tucson. And you can see in that circular chart that's over on the right-hand side of the slide that they rated us for almost all of the 17 goals. Now, there are a few they didn't rate us for. They didn't rate us for number 14 because a lot of states in the United States don't have a body of water next to them. We're not all Hawaii or California. So they didn't look at that because they wanted to be able to compare all the states in the United States. They also didn't look at number 17 because number 17 is partnerships for the goal. And that's really looking at how the nations of the world work with each other to try and achieve the sustainable development goals. So they didn't really think it made any sense to take that down to the state level since it's really the national government that has to do that. But they did look at all the other areas. And so you can see some of them we're not doing very well at as a state. For example, poverty. We had an average performance of 25 out of 100 on reducing our poverty rate. So that's not good. That means there are a lot of poor people here in Arizona. And that's probably not a surprise to many of you. Number four, we also don't do well on quality education. A lot of that has to do with the amount we pay our teachers and the amount we invest in education, but there are other things that lead into that as well. Number five, gender equality. Didn't do very well with that at the state level. We did do better in Tucson, as you'll see in a minute. Another one of the red ones are sustainable cities and communities. Again, a lot of growth that's not very sustainable, building houses that don't have sustainable water supplies, a lot of things that are an issue. And then, of course, the sprawl leads to a lot of pollution. And climate action did a little better on that one than some of the other red slices on there, but still not very good. Still just a little over a 50 out of 100. So part of that is a little bit better than some of the others because we do have a climate action plan here in the state. As you'll see, we do better than that in Tucson as well in just a minute. And then finally, peace, justice, and strong institutions. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we just have so many people incarcerated. In other words, people in prison here in Tucson or here in Arizona in general. And so that's a big part of where that rating comes from. So you can see, compared to all the 50 states, Arizona ranked number 29 out of 50. So we're not the worst, but we're certainly a long ways from being the best. Now, in 2019, this same group also did a US cities sustainable development report. And so they looked at the top 100 largest US cities. Tucson, Arizona ranked number 57 out of this rating of 100 cities. That's not based on the size of the city or anything, that's just based on how we did on the various elements of the report card. And so, again, they looked at just the 15 sustainable development goals that they looked at for the state of Arizona. And you can see that while we're still not doing great, there are some things that we are much better than the whole state as a whole did. For example, climate action, we're at 86 out of 100. So that was our best performance. And that's because the city and the county have very strong plans for climate action. And so that's one of the positives that we have coming out of this report. We also are doing very well on some of the things like sustainable consumption. So we have recycling programs and things in place to help to reduce our waste in the way that we consume things. Gender equality, we did really well. That was 64 out of 100. So there is a real emphasis in Tucson on gender equality and making sure that everyone is getting treated as equally as possible, that they're getting paid the same amount for the same hours of work. And so we did pretty well on those three. The things we didn't do so well on, one of them is really very sad, and that's number 7, which is um, the energy. So a clean and sustainable energy source. We're here in the Sonoran Desert. We have plenty of sun, and yet we only got a 24 out of 100. And that's because, as you'll see in a minute, I'm actually going to go into the details of that one. Same thing on our economics, so strong economy, um, quality education. We didn't do quite as bad as the state as a whole, but we still didn't do really well. And then the no poverty followed very closely by zero hunger. And of course, those are related. So let's look at the details of some of those 5 worst things that we had on there. Okay, so the worst was affordable and clean energy. That's sustainable development goal number 7. And you can see from this chart, this is from Tucson Electric Power. They have to do an integrated resource plan on a regular basis that they then submit to the Arizona Corporation Commission. And you can see this is their renewable energy generation chart. And so right now in 2020, a very small amount on the right-hand side is the percent of how much of the energy that Tucson Electric Power supplies is generated by renewable sources. And you can see that right now it's just a little bit over 10%. It's like about 12%. Next year, that's going to bump up to a little over 25%. And that's because Tucson Electric Power is either buying power from or building wind farms in New Mexico. So there's going to be one in Borderlands right on the Arizona-New Mexico border, and another one at Oso Grande, which is a little bit farther into Mexico. And so that's going to bump us up. But even after that, there's not much additional renewable energy being added to the portfolio, and especially not a whole lot of solar. So you can see that we really aren't getting very far in generating renewable and reliable energy for everyone. We don't even get to 35% by the year 2030. So that's why we didn't get ranked very well on that particular area. On decent work and economic growth, sustainable development goal number 8, you can see that our business growth, and these numbers come from 2018 because that's the last year that the Census Bureau did a study for the city of Tucson. Business growth, not much business growth, and we were already down in the bottom percentage of all the southwestern states, which is what those, if you see those clouds with the suns and things and the arrows, that's comparing to other states in our region and other cities in our region. So um, no real growth from 2017 to 2018. Employment grew, but not as fast as a lot of the rest of the area around us. Housing is affordable. We have that going for us. The median household income has gone up a little bit, but it's still below a lot of the other cities that are in our region. And then the real GDP, that's the gross domestic product, which is a measure of economic output. That's pretty low and it's been dropping. And of course, since the coronavirus pandemic struck us, you can see that just in the last 2 weeks of March, we had a big increase in the amount of unemployment. And so this is going to hurt us even more as we go down the road because it's going to take a while to get those jobs back. They're not going to come back immediately. So we definitely have a problem there with people being able to get decent work. And that, of course, also rolls over into, do they have enough income to pay for the things they need to pay for? Quality education, you can see we do pretty well on college majors. We do have really good schools here in Arizona, and they generally are doing well, providing quality educations for people that come to those schools, both residents and non-resident. We have a lot of people that have a bachelor's or better, so we have a lot of people who have a college education. But you can see our graduation rates for high school are 78%, which is in the bottom percentage of all of our region, and it's been going down. So that's a real problem. We don't have people that are finishing high school. We're doing well. Those who do finish high school and go on to college are doing well, but we have a lot who aren't going on to college and who aren't finishing high school. And then also, we don't have a lot of enrollment in pre-K 12. So pre-kindergarten enrollment, or actually, the pre-K 12 is pre-kindergarten. So that's like preschool and kindergarten prep classes. And that's really important. That early education has been shown to help people be better learners down the road. And so you can see we're not doing very well there. We've got two clouds. We're in the bottom percentage of the area that we're in the western area. Student achievement, our scores are about in the middle of the region, but they've been going down. And then teacher wages are the lowest. We're dead last in teacher wages. This has gone up a little bit because we did have the Red for Ed campaign since this chart was made, but it's still we're lagging much of the country as far as teacher wages. And of course, it's hard for teachers, as much as they may love to teach, it's hard for them to be able to teach if they just don't make enough money to make a decent living out of it. And then, of course, with the pandemic, um, you can see this is a coverage chart of where Wi-Fi coverage is available throughout the state. And this has really highlighted that a lot of students don't have access to the internet or don't have access to computers when they're away from school and when libraries and other sources of public computers are closed. So that's a real problem too. We have a real gap between the people who do have access to the resources they need to be able to learn and people who don't. And that gap is very large, and it's something that we definitely need to work on. Okay, finally, number 16, this is talking about peaceful, inclusive societies for sustainable development. It's mostly here that the rating was largely based on how many people we have incarcerated who are serving in jail, serving in prison. There is a little bit of a bright point here in that we actually had more inmates released from prison up through March of this year than had been admitted. So we actually are going the right direction, but we still have a lot of people who are imprisoned, and that's a problem because they're not contributing to society. They're not um, helping to build families. They're not in the community, helping people in the community, and so that's something we really need to address is our incarceration rate. And then, of course, poverty. And as you saw earlier, we were talking about unemployment and how that's been increasing. That, of course, is also going to increase the amount of poverty. You can see on the right-hand side is a map of the state of Arizona, and the darker the color, the higher the rate of poverty, or the lower the overall income is. And so, again, probably not a big surprise. A lot of the native nations have a fairly high poverty rate. And then Pima County, which is down there at the bottom of the map, is kind of in the middle as far as the state goes. But then when you look at Tucson, you can see again here the darker colors mean a higher poverty rate. We go from 2.1%, which is down in the Vale area, to 40.4%, which is South Tucson. And the city of Tucson itself is at 23.4%. So that's how many people in the city of Tucson are living in poverty. And so that's a real issue. I mean, when nearly one in every four people in Tucson are living in poverty, that's something that we really need to address. So hopefully you'll have some thoughts about how we can improve that problem. And with that, this was a real brief overview. I didn't want to take too much of your time because I want you to start working on your projects and coming up with some really great ideas about how we can make Tucson, Arizona, and the rest of the world better. And so, happy Earth Day. It was a pleasure talking to you.